Welcome to Florida Realtors Live. I'm your host, Tracy Velt. I am a contributing editor to Florida Realtor Magazine, a managing editor at HousingWire, and also the host of HousingWire's Real Trending podcast. So this morning I have Cynthia DeLuca. She's a realtor with Adams, Cameron & Co. Realtors and also a Florida Realtor instructor. So welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're going to talk all things wealth building today. And so you purchased your first rental property in 1999.
Yes.
What made you realize this was maybe something bigger than just a one-off property?
Right. Well, I'll tell you, I kind of accidentally bought my first property and learned, it took me about a year to get it occupied and to learn about it and know what all the things I was doing wrong. And after that first year passed, I went and filed my tax returns. And my accountant said, you know, you've made money. And I go, what? So I recognized probably about a year later that I was cash flowing and making money. And then the second part was I realized all the tax benefits for the deductions on my tax returns. I've owned companies since I was 18, so I knew there was tax benefits, but I didn't really know what that meant in dollars. So I think from there I became hooked and I got addicted.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And so you said real estate is one of the only things that keeps pace with inflation and over your whole career. So can you make that more concrete for agents? What has that actually meant for your bottom line since 1999?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting when I think back. That first property I bought was a 2-unit property, so 2 different tenants or units. And I remember it took me almost a year to rent the second unit. And at the time it was renting for $300 a month, which isn't even like a power bill these days.
No.
So today that rent, it's an efficiency, so it's small. I get $1,550 a month. So when you do the math over time, that's over a 6% average annual increase. And when you think about average, we've had markets like the Great Recession where rents went down, not up. And then we had months or years like post-COVID where rents went up tremendously to keep up with all the other costs and expenses and everything went up. So I think that's definitely an advantage to help us keep up with inflation versus, there's other options of investing, but
yeah, move into a college town and you pay $1,200 a room.
Yeah.
So,
yes.
So yeah, you could definitely get a good return for your investment there, for sure.
Yeah.
So you believe in long-term ownership over quick flips. So walk us through the math, like buy, hold, pay off, retire on cash flow, and why does that model work better than flipping?
Well, so for flipping, and I've done flipping, so I'll be honest about that. I've done that. There's nothing necessarily wrong with it, but there's bigger advantages to the long-term hold. So when you flip, you have to time it properly with the market. So you're really not in control because to be able to make that profit. With buying and holding long-term, you're getting actually multiple opportunities and advantages, not just from the appreciation as it rises, but also from forced appreciation, we call it, where the tenant's making a payment every month that's paying down your mortgage. So you owe less and less every month, plus you're getting the cash flow, plus you're getting depreciation for taxes. So there's really 4 benefits versus flipping, and flipping has some pretty high, intense IRS, disadvantages. So
yeah, absolutely. You have to hold it for a little while before you get that advantage. So right now, obviously the market has been, sporadic, let's put it that way. And a lot of agents are thinking, I can't even pay my bills, much less invest in property. What are some ways that you recommend that they start moving to that path?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting because the majority of the properties that I've bought that have been the best investments for me was when I was broke and didn't have any money, and you find the money. So if it's a good enough deal, there are people out there that will help you. But really, I think the path for helping people first is to evaluate their own household debt. And so you've got to eliminate living outside of your means. That's one big thing that, to start. The second thing is turning your own property into a rental is really the easiest. because you can buy another house with FHA or VA financing. It's very little money down.
Yeah.
Use your current home as a rental investment and move from there. They can also, anybody can start with a duplex, a triplex, or a quadplex. You can also get those with VA and FHA financing. That's how my daughter got started in investing. She bought a duplex. She lived in one side. You do have to live there for 1 year minimum. She lived in one side and rented the other side, and it only cost her $200 a month out of her own pocket because of the cash flow.
Yeah.
And then she moved after a year, bought another property, and just kept the cycle going.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've earmarked specific rental properties to pay for each of your kids' college. So how did you structure that, and could another agent actually replicate that, and how?
Absolutely. So this actually used to be part of my marketing that I would share with buyers and potential buyers that I worked with. I have my youngest is a senior starting a senior year of college this year, and I've had 4 kids go through. He's my 4th. And the whole idea is to buy a property when they're young, put it on a 15-year mortgage, or accelerate the payments for 15 years. So by the time that they're 18 or 17 and starting college, you've got a couple of options. One, the property is paid for. So that property, because I put everything back from the cash flow back into that property to pay it off and maintain it. And then from there, you can either sell the property, take the money to put towards their college fund. You can keep it for the cash flow, and the monthly cash flow can help pay for the college expenses of tuition, or thankfully, my youngest is on scholarship. And so that's his spending money, for lack of better terms, to buy his equipment he needed for his college, food. I mean, college kids are not cheap.
No.
So I purchased different properties specifically with different kids' names, and they all knew which one was their property.
Yeah,
So.
yeah, that's great. I love that idea. And I think most agents, obviously, they sell the dream of homeownership on a daily basis. But what does it take to actually help them realize it themselves in more than just their own home?
Yeah, I think that is probably the biggest challenge is the education, is people realizing you can do this. You don't have to be ultra rich. You don't have to have a bunch of extra money laying around. There are lots of opportunities, and we help other people build family wealth and generational wealth by owning homes. We know that it's a huge advantage for people, but we just don't really think about it enough for ourselves. And interestingly enough, some of the properties that I own today, probably at least 10 properties that I own today, came from investors that I sold those properties to those investors. Okay. When they wanted to retire, they came to me and said, hey, you buy these. And so I think we recognize we do help people build wealth, but we should also think about ourselves.
And where can they get that education? I think a lot of people are interested in doing that, but they're really, like I said, not sure where to start. And other than doing their own research, is there somewhere they can go for help?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So I will tell you, I got a mentor early on, which was very helpful by taking a CE class at my local Association of Realtors on investing. The Florida Realtors Convention has a big wealth building summit today. There's educational classes happening, around the state, and Florida Realtors is really helping with that as well. So it's seeking out that and learning as much as you can about it, because it's much better to learn from people who've already been there and done that than to try to recreate the wheel.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what does a realistic financing path look like for an agent who may think they can't do it?
This is such an exciting time to be an investor and start as an investor, because we have these loans called DSCR loans, and they stand for debt service coverage ratio. That's a fancy term, but basically it's if the property can cash flow and pay for itself, they don't look at the person as much to qualify. So you don't have to have the extra income to pay for the property if the income is coming from the property. So you generally have to have a tenant in place and a lease, but some of them are going as low as 5% with a down payment. It's just an amazing time to buy real estate right now.
And I'm going back to your kids' college. Do they get that property once they graduate?
So, no. I'll tell you, we actually sat down with our kids because they're all adults now, basically, and we sat down with them about a year and a half ago, and had a family meeting and said, here's where we're at. The IRS is a big part of our decisions these days, and there's some advantages to passing your properties on to your children after, or your heirs, I should say, after you pass. So we discussed that. So now I'm a little concerned that our kids are counting down when we pass. I don't know if that was a good idea or not, but either way, yeah, it's more about strategy now, and they all know we've raised them in it. But I'll tell you what one of the advantages was that we found later on of naming each property for them. They took ownership in that property.
Yeah.
Even when they started driving and they would drive by, like they would mention stuff like, hey, I think it's almost time for a paint job.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know, of course they didn't want to pay for it, but
Right.
they, you know,
Yeah.
they took some pride in it.
Yeah, that's interesting. You and your husband are now living off of the cash flow, so traveling, doing what you call pre-retirement. How many properties roughly and how many years did it take you to get to that point?
That's a great question. So I am loving life right now in this pre-retirement phase, we call it. We're traveling 6 months out of the year. So 2 months on, 2 months off. I just got back Thursday into the swing of things. So the amount of properties, I get that question all the time, is how many properties do you need? Yeah. Let me pose it a different way. In my mind, the question is how much cash flow do you need to live the life that you want? And so I set my goals years ago of this is the cash flow I wanted at a certain point in time to retire. And then I backtracked and said, how many properties would I need paid off with the rents, and go from there. I know people that have 4 properties that make it work. And then I also know people that have 100 properties, but they negatively cash flow. So if they're in the negative, all they have is a bunch of debt.
Yeah.
They don't really have an asset necessarily. So that's, it's really about, for me, determining the cash flow and then working backwards. But I have seen people with 4, think about it, if you have 4 properties at $2,500 a month, that's $10,000 a month.
Yeah. So my last question is just what is one thing you wish you would have done when you first started out?
Oh, this sounds so boring, but learn the IRS tax codes. You know, the buy really does, you start with the end in mind. So you have to know what the end goal is. And when you build up the asset and you have these properties, disposing of them can be quite catastrophic, you know, with paying taxes and gains, and you have to recapture the depreciation and so on, part of it. And so it's really structuring with the end in mind. And almost every investor I've worked with, they never think about the end goal. Yeah. My first question is, what's your exit strategy? And they just don't know. Yeah. So I would have studied the IRS more. Always get an accountant that either owns their own rental properties or is involved in investments some way, somehow, because they're going to be paying more attention to that tax code. So that benefits me and them. So definitely the taxes.
All right. Well, Cynthia, thanks so much for joining Florida Realtors Live.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.